Welcome to another episode of the Harder to Breathe podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dusick. I was the founding drummer of Maroon 5, but I'm now a licensed therapist, author, and mental health advocate. With me, as always, is my co-host, Duck Maylard. How you doing, Duck?
I'm excited. I'm
yeah?
excited. Yeah, we finally got rid of that the fluff of a guest, and we're just getting right down to the meat and potatoes of you and me.
Yeah.
talking.
Well, this is we've only done this, I think, twice before. Your first episode,
right,
and then the end of the first season,
which were both kind of monumental moments. So this is a little more casual, trying something a little different today. But
well, I feel like it might be a good thing. First off, we've gotten good feedback about the intros being some of the highlights because we're just kind of rolling with it, doing our thing.
And more than once, we have looked and been like, we should wrap this up because it's already 25 minutes. We're having a great conversation, and you kind of wish it could keep going. So this is an opportunity to do that as well.
Yeah, I think it'll be cool to do this a little bit more regularly. Not like every other week, but maybe once a month or once a quarter. Like this is the spring check-in.
Spring cleaning. We're cleaning out the pipes. Taking out the trash. So.
I speaking of spring, I'm going to take a controversial stand here and say spring is the best season.
I really thought you were going to be like, spring sucks.
I was being ironical.
Gotcha.
Everyone loves springtime.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. Yeah. I grew up, as we know, on the East Coast, and spring was literally, you'd see the crocus flowers would be the first flowers that would pop through the snow, and you'd be like, okay, it's on its way. And you'd see a robin picking a worm, like very idyllic. But I was more of a summer guy because I like to be outside with shorts and Southern California. That's kind of the difference between spring and summer is instead of 78 degrees, it's 85 degrees.
Right.
But I agree. Spring's pretty awesome.
Well, summer, I'm a baseball guy, so there's a strong association with spring and summer. But spring is when it starts, so you're all excited.
That's true. Everyone has hope.
Yeah.
We're going to go 162-0.
But also it's rejuvenation. You start going outside more. I think I probably have a little bit of that seasonal affective disorder. Either that or I'm just a human being who, sunlight, vitamin D, these things are good for us.
Well, today's a bad example because it's pouring.
Well, it's confusing. I mean, this is coming out on April 1st.
Right.
I didn't prepare an April Fool's joke. Too late.
Well, the joke is there's no guest. Ha ha.
Right.
You just wasted your time without these two idiots for an hour.
But we're shooting this a month before, as we usually do. And this time of year is very confusing to me because I'm so excited for spring to start. And you get like 1 week in LA, at least. I don't know if that's the way it is around the country, but you get 1 week where it's really warm and really sunny. And you're like, oh,
it's here.
And then all of a sudden it's cold and gray and raining.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ugh.
When I went to school in Ithaca, there was always a saying that was, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. Because you're on the top of a mountain, you're at the base of a lake. It's renowned for, it'll be snowing 1 minute and then it's sunny. And LA, it's a little different because it hadn't rained here so much in the last year. We'd sort of crept back into a drought, but now all of a sudden we're getting rain every other day. And I try to plan to play golf and it gets ruined by the rain, but it's still, it's needed. We need the rain. And so I can see the benefit of it, even though it ruins my golf game. Are you a spring cleaning guy? Like, is there a part of you that every year feels like, okay, it's time to reset my life, reset my home, things like that? Do you find a compulsive need, or is that just an all year round thing for you?
Say,
I can see it.
I'm a spring cleaning guy year round.
Yeah, in November.
No, I think it does come. It's cyclical for me. There are times when I'm, in the wintertime you tend to sort of like nest more and kind of dig in, and then when the sun comes out and you want to feel that freshness, you kind of want to shed a layer of skin and kind of start over. There's definitely something to that. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, at least for me.
I feel it a bit as a homeowner where, especially when I know the rains are coming, I have to get up on my roof and clean out my gutters and stupid shit like that. But I'm not as much of it's a new year, it's a new me. I have to restart because as you get older, the years all blend into one, and it's just a slow, inevitable march towards death.
Okay, this is uplifting.
I said, yearly household chores that have to get done in the spring. So that's the only kind of yearly ritual that I do. I'm the same way. I try to keep on top of things because it's strange. I'm sort of a messy person, but I'm not a dirty person. Like, I really like clean dishes in the sink, and I like laundry folded and done. And I'll come home and put stuff on a table, and then after a couple of weeks, the table becomes cluttered and you have to clean it off. And that really messes with I look at our counters, and there's dishes and plates and bags, and I go, this is hurting my brain, and I have to fix it. But it's not a spring thing. It's an all year round thing. So we're in the same boat there, I think.
I tend to the second I use a plate, I put it in the dishwasher.
You're that guy.
You know I am.
I know you do. I wish my family was like that, because I literally go, the dishwasher's right here. You're just putting it in the sink. You could just put it here. And they're like, it's early in the morning. We have school. I'm like, anyway, I can't complain because they're doing this all while I get to sleep in. So
Right. You get a pass when you have kids. I mean, come on. Like,
True.
You really can't keep everything
But
tidy.
as we've discussed many times, my son not putting a water glass in the sink is a pet peeve that sets me off. So you can understand why I.
It's interesting because you're not a neat freak. You're kind of you roll with the punches more than I do, certainly. And yet that's a pet peeve for you.
Yeah. Because again, I think there's a big part of it that is me trying to set my son up for success in life. Yeah. And so I go, don't do what mom and I do. We're cluttered idiots. You have to learn how to put the glass in the dishwasher. And when he doesn't, it's like he's being defiant or something.
One of my dad's favorite sayings when I was growing up was, do as I say, not as I do.
Of course.
Because he knew he had certain shortcomings. And it was like, you got to lead by example, right?
I know.
You got to be the model.
I know. As everyone knows, I'd like to drink vitamin water on the reg. That was a replacement for soda. I used to drink Coke nonstop, and it took its toll on my teeth in my teen years. I had horrible teeth. Really? I had to get a lot of dental work. And my son has certainly found a taste for soda. He didn't for the first, 7 or 8 years of his life. And then we were like, well, Sprite. All the kids start with Sprite. That's the gateway.
Oh, yeah.
The gateway soda. Because it's clean, so you think it's water.
Right.
But now he's constantly like, can I have a Coke with a cherry Coke with dinner? And be like, no. And then I'll be like, don't drink soda, kids. So yes, there's a lot of him. But it's, I'm 47. My teeth are already all replaced. You still have all your natural teeth. You should try to save them.
Yeah. Well, my household growing up was it was like pseudo health conscious in that 80s sort of way.
Right.
It was like we had,
juicy juice. It's 10% juice.
Well, it was during that craze. Well, you didn't grow up in LA. Of course, I remember everyone was always on a diet. I remember all the women in my family these were the conversations around Thanksgiving dinner. It's like, oh, I really shouldn't be doing this. I should be watching my carbs. It was like the Atkins, or it was every year it was a different craze. And so I got some mixed messages, I think, because we had like sweets around the house, but they were like fat-free or sugar-free, like those kind of things. It was like, is this really an indulgence, or what's the point?
Right.
But then you look back and you realize, like, was that any healthier? It's just like high in trans fats.
I remember an old Garfield cartoon with him eating a box of diet candy, and he's like, a couple more boxes of this and I'll be thin as a rail. Shout out to Jim Davis.
That reminds me of a funny story, actually. When I was probably about 8 or 10 years old, somewhere in there, and it's that age where you sleep over at friend's house a lot. That was like what you looked forward to on the weekend. Thing. I had a friend whose house was always stocked with all of the best cereal. Right? It was Fruit Loops, Fruity Pebbles, Lucky Charms, Frosted Flakes, all that stuff. And so I always looked forward going to his house, because my house, we had Grape Nuts and Cheerios.
Chex.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Same. So one afternoon, my mom gets a call from my friend's mom. Gina, are you feeding your son? And she's like, what are you talking about? Well, he comes over here and he eats like 5 bowls of cereal every time. And she's like, what? Wait, what kind of cereal?
Yeah.
And then she told her. So that was like, you realize it's like, you can't win as a parent, because if you deprive your child, then they're just going to, they're going to find it elsewhere.
Yep.
And then it's going to be overindulgence. I suppose the best way is to try to just create balance.
Right. Occasionally you have a treat. And I had a similar experience, actually. My mom's choices for buying us Grape Nuts and Chex and, cornflakes weren't health conscious. Those were the cheapest. Right, those are the ones that she had coupons for. And every now and then she'd get a coupon that was like double coupons for $2 off Apple Jacks. And we'd come down in the morning and there'd be this floating holy grail of a sugary cereal. And my sister and I, it was heaven. But it carried over to when I finally went to college and I went into a dining hall, and they had those self-serve cereal things where you could just pull.
Right, yes.
I did the same thing. I must have eaten. I was like, Fruity Pebbles? I can just keep eating it, and I'd go back for more and take some home in my bag. Like,
I swear, my freshman year of college,
I gorged.
I ate sugar cereal for almost every meal for the first like 2 months until I was like sick.
Yeah.
For dinner, sometimes I would get like a bag of soft batch cookies, like a cup of noodles, and a bag of like Doritos.
Wasn't metabolism great? You just eat an entire box of Entenmann's and be like, I'm good. Let's go get Subway.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think the same thing happened with me with alcohol to a certain extent, because I was raised to believe, and I was a good boy, you know, that it was evil and that only
bad boys drank.
and that alcoholics were bad people and all that stuff. Yeah. And so I was very afraid of it. And then all of a sudden in my 20s, I realized like, oh my God, everyone drinks. And most of my friends are binge drinking, you know, it was like college age. And then I realized, oh, I was lied to. And so it was like, then I overcompensated.
Yeah.
Right. Because I'd never had as a teenager. And then I was like, oh, I guess I can have fun now. And I don't know if there's a way to introduce these things to your kid in a way that they reach college age and they're like, yeah, whatever, it's fine. It's not gonna take it, I'll leave it. Or if that's just...
it's one of the reasons. I mean, it's one of the reasons I never wanted to tempt that outcome, because I remember, like when I moved, we grew up, we never had soda really. We had diet soda, which is a great way to keep kids off soda. If you only give them diet, they think it tastes like horrible. And then we moved to Connecticut, and my mom, the guy that my mom was engaged to, had money, and he would buy cases of Coke, and we just had Coke in the pantry, and I could just go in there and down one and get another one, and suddenly I had the same reaction as you, where I would just drink it nonstop. And I wonder if I had access to a case of beers, would I just drink it nonstop? So I figured I'd never set myself up for that.
It's probably
eventuality.
Wise. It's probably I mean, I didn't understand it when I first met you, but now that
there's so many factors, that it's a good segue. If something I wanted to talk about is that there are so many factors that I never thought about. I always, when people say, do you drink? And I say, no, I don't drink. I'm not on the wagon or anything. It's not a real conscious choice. I just never decided. But in sort of having our conversations that we've had over the last year and guests that we've had, I'm amazed at the lack of personal introspection that I really gave to those big life choices of mine. You even helped me a couple weeks ago sort of get to a core memory of my vomit phobia and things, of a really traumatic memory with my father coming home from work sick, which now we realize he was probably drunk. Right. And where he was lying on a couch asleep, and I was watching TV next to him, and he just got up and was projectile vomiting, probably all liquor. But it was such a formative thing. I literally ran out of the house, ran across the street where my mom happened to work a couple buildings down at the town hall. But I just ran. And that was my fight or flight instinct. And that's such a seminal memory for me. But I never applied it to my ongoing phobia. And that's a traumatic memory. And so there are many things like that this show has enlightened for me. But I think back, when we started this show, I think I've been a podcast listener for years, and I don't think of podcasts unless you're listening to an instructive podcast, like here's how to build a boat, a 10 podcast episode series. Right. I just listened to it for entertainment value, and I kind of thought that's what our show would be. But I was thinking back, because I was watching last night our episode with Brant Menswar, which was a great episode. I often ask for, give me something tangible. Give me 5 steps that I can take. Give me 3 steps. And he did not balk at that request. He gave me a plan of action. Here's what I would say for you, Duck, about your career and the things that you need to do. And I was like, wow, he actually did give me a tool. And then I thought back, Dr. Suzanne taught us about menopause and women's reproductive health that 2 guys in their 40s didn't know about, didn't care to know about, because we didn't think it applied to us. Right. I think back, all of these different guests that we've had that have taught me things, that I am a more well-rounded and educated individual because of this show. And now I'm excited for the next year of guests, not knowing what I'm going to learn, going forward. So it's an added benefit to getting our message out there, is that people are sharing their lessons and their tools with me. And I now have those in my back pocket.
I apologize for chuckling a little bit because you said, I don't know if you noticed, but you said, give me 3 steps. And I couldn't stop myself. I was about to go, give me 3 steps, give me 3 steps. Okay. No, but I agree. The podcast for me has been an outgrowth of a journey that I started a couple years earlier when my book was coming out. And I was...
That book?
This book.
Harder to Breathe?
This book,
Where can
Harder
people
to Breathe.
get that?
Have you heard of it?
You can get that on Amazon and where fine books are sold.
You can buy it at Barnes & Noble. You can get it on Amazon.
Okay, anyway, back to what you're saying.
Apparently, it's a good book.
I've heard.
When I was promoting the book, I was going on everyone's podcast. Just like, didn't matter whether they had 10,000 followers or 10 followers.
Right.
But it was a crash course in that world because I wasn't really a podcast person before that. But what it did for me, as much as promote my book, was it kind of opened me up to a whole world of people and connections and things that I didn't know existed, which kind of led to the world of public speaking, the world of advocacy, the world of coaching, all these different things that I'm like, do I want to pursue that? Do I want to? And then making these connections and these people that some of whom have been like really interesting people that are on the same wavelength in terms of things that I'm passionate about. And then others that I've had to figure out, is this where I want to be or not? And I think this podcast as an outgrowth of that for me has been similar in that regard. It's been, we've met so many people now. And I mean, how many episodes that we've done?
Like 30 something at this point.
Well, the first season was 28 episodes, and this season we've already done 10 or 12 or
probably
something.
near 40 episodes.
Yeah, 40 episodes. So, that's a lot of different people to have hour-long conversations with that you just met that have, at the very least, an interesting story
to tell. Right.
And so it really broadens your horizons to do that and to realize like, okay, well, there's a lot of different people out there. And I think that it's, as somebody who, as a young man, in particular, as a teenager, had that angsty attitude of like, I don't like people. People are annoying. I'm not really interested.
I don't need a lesson. I know everything.
Yeah. And I just like, I only wanted to talk to people that I agreed with and that liked the same things as me. And realizing there's a lot to be gained by listening to people, even if you disagree with them.
Yeah.
And that's a skill set that we've been forced to kind of do. And I wish that more people were in this world because we're losing that.
And not even disagree with, just maybe have no knowledge of where our worlds could possibly overlap.
Right.
Someone like Chris Panayotou we've had on, who is a financial expert, which you and I are not business guys, but we learned some tools that we can apply in our field, And so I think about, if that's the experience that you and I are having as guests, and we have our shared experience, what our listeners must be getting. Because not everyone lives in LA. Not everyone had a music career. Not everyone knows what being in Hollywood is like. And so we are adding our little spice to that mix as well for listeners, and might be interesting to them to hear those stories. And I think it's great. I think it's an added benefit that I did not anticipate going into starting this show.
Well, even between you and me, because we obviously, as far as the world goes, we're closer together in terms of our sensibilities than most, because we're both creative people. We're both sensitive, kind of compassionate feeling people. However, there are some pretty big differences in terms of our tastes, in terms of the ways that we relate to the world because of our past and our certain proclivities or sensitivities. And those things come up in conversation. And that's always interesting for me too, because I'm like, I don't know, when you have a friend that you get along with on a lot of levels, so you have similar taste in music, or you have similar political leaning or whatever, you kind of assume, we're seeing everything the same way. And then you realize like everyone's experience is nuanced and different. And I appreciate that so much, especially because, I'm a professional and it's easy to get into that world of mental health from a clinical standpoint. And then you come from a much more emotional place of personal experience that brings me out of that and reminds me why I got into this in the first place. Yeah. And so it's just always fascinating to me. And this is part of what I love in other podcasts as well, the ones that I really enjoy, other than ones that are just really a lot of fun. Even some of the funny ones, it's the things that I end up enjoying the most is like, here's two people talking.
Wouldn't necessarily,
they're not on the same page about everything. They have some kind of mutual appreciation or some reason why they're in a room together talking. And they may, for most intents and purposes, be on the same page. But then you realize like, oh my God, their experiences are vastly different in certain regards. And that's what makes for interesting conversation. That's what makes for learning and growing. And the people who have helped me expand my awareness most have been the ones that have a different perspective than me. And that's what we need most, I think, in this world right now. I feel like social media and the digital world that we live in, and how it's not inherently bad, it's not inherently good. There's pros and cons to it. It's a tool that can be used. But the one major problem that we're running into, and we're seeing it in every level of discourse, is that you get stuck in this little silo. You actually end up more isolated. Because
echo chamber.
Yeah, the echo chamber. And so just making this podcast has been an exercise for me. I hope that we're coming across as curious, and that if we're not, that we continue to foster that curiosity in the way that we go about talking to each other and talking to our guests. And that I carry that into my life more, because I can still at this point in my life be cynical.
Oh, sure.
I can still be like, I don't need to watch that. I don't need to hear that. I don't need to read that. And then I realize, but that's shutting me off. Even if it's something that at the end of the day, I'm going to end up disagreeing with. There's still something to be learned from the discourse.
It's difficult. It's especially difficult in today's world where there is no middle ground. There is no, well, we disagreed on it is, this video says you're right and this video says you're wrong, and you either check this box or check this box. There isn't even material out there for people who want to live in this. Well, I can see this side, not just politically, just on all issues. I found that my strategy is, and it's easier said than done, not getting worked up when the videos you disagree with come up, or the opinions you disagree with come up. If you try to trace it back, fundamentally people are trying to do what they think is best. And if you approach it from that part, you can go, all right, all the other bullshit I disagree with and I think is infuriating. And obviously there are some exceptions when there is malice and personal, bad intentions, but for the most part, people's ideological differences are simply just that, a difference in approach in what they view as the best way to get something done.
Yeah.
So again, and it's easy to say from a privileged point of view as a white, middle-aged, heterosexual cis male who is not going to have his rights affected by certain policy changes and things like that. So it's always taken with a grain of salt when we say this, hey, just let it go, just roll with it. But for the purposes of a mental health podcast where the goal is get yourself centered, don't get too stressed, don't get too high, don't get too low. Well, you can get high, don't get too low. That's an approach that I take, is where I've started to take things a lot less seriously in terms of, I get so worked up about this. I can't allow myself to do that. I have to try to stay a little more centered. And it's absolutely worked, I have to admit. And that some of that is the tools that I've learned on this show from you and from guests of really focusing on what matters, my family, my son, his journey through this life, and the lessons we try to teach him about not drinking soda and things like that. So for what that's worth, take it with a grain of salt. But if it helps you to take a step back and force yourself, make the conscious choice to be like, this video is making me angry. I'm not going to let it make me angry. I have to force myself to watch and go, okay, I'm letting it go. Challenge yourself this week. See if you can do it.
Well, I wonder how much that overlaps with our recent conversation. I don't know if this episode will have aired yet when this one airs, what order they'll come out. But we touched on recently, your trigger of injustice. Right. And how much you get so worked up about something. It has to do with that same reflex.
Yes.
Of sensing some sort of injustice in the world and like feeling like you can't do, or you need to do something.
It's the same impulse of, I have to fire off a mean tweet or a mean response on a message board back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
And I force myself to be like, is this actually going to do any good, or is this going to inflame things? No, I'm going to delete it, and just let it go. Maybe I'm being the bigger person, or maybe I'm just avoiding a conflict. But the same thing comes in real life if somebody is parked outside my house with their music too loud and I'm trying to record a podcast or something, rather than go out there with a shut that off, turn it down, go in with a little more peaceful approach. And it's made my life a lot more peaceful.
I've got a friend, a very good old friend of mine. I do.
You have a friend?
Yeah. Okay. I have one other friend.
Where are they? They're not here.
Yeah, that's true. Adam Leibowitz. You've met him, right? Yeah. One of my oldest friends, one of my brother's two best friends growing up, who became one of my best friends as well. We were in our first band together, Free Reign, before Cars Flowers. He moved down to Orange County years ago, and so I don't see him as much as I used to, but we we're like brothers. Whenever we see each other, it's like family. And we agree on most things, but we're very different. It's a similar thing. We're like very close, have a very similar sensibility, but there are some glaring ways in which we're different. And one of those ways is that he literally loves to go online and like get in an argument with somebody who's like hard right.
He likes to shitpost. He likes to stir the pot.
And like, if somebody says something that he disagrees with, he will spend hours. It's not trolling. He just, he thinks and my dad's the same way. He thinks he can change someone's mind. And my dad does it like out on the softball field. I'm sure you've seen it, you know, he'll realize somebody has a differing point of view and he'd be like, let me talk to you about this. And he, as a lawyer, he thinks he could kind of like, and sometimes he does actually coax them to start to see his side a little bit more.
I'm just a small town lawyer, but I know oppression when I see it.
But I've just, the whole, like, engaging with trolls, engaging with somebody who is already worked up and is so dug in, I just don't even see the point. Like, you're just going to make yourself angry. You're going to make them more angry. If anything, you're going to harden their stance even more. It's one thing, I mean, I do admire, because my dad does it from as much of a place of wanting to change someone's mind, I think, is he is curious and he wants to understand somebody's opinion. If you take that stance, you have a much better shot of making inroads in terms of them realizing that you're not the devil because we disagree. Yeah. If you come at them with like, no, you're an idiot, nothing is going to be gained. Like, you're both just going to dig in your heels even more. So it's not my nature in general. Every now and then I'll find myself in a situation. It's usually when I'm with a friend, somebody that I thought like we agreed on most things. And then I realize we have a big disagreement and I get kind of worked up. And then I want to like, no, you don't understand. You don't understand. Clearly you don't understand. Let me explain it to you. Let me fix this for you because you're in the wrong. And you know,
you might leave off that last part.
No, I'm just saying like that's what it feels like inside. I don't say those words. And so I get to have that impulse. And then I realize, even with a friend, if my agenda is just to change their mind, it's not going to help anything. Yeah. We're just going to end up disagreeing more and digging in our heels. But if I'm more sort of Socratic, asking more questions,
let them come to their own conclusions that you were trying to get them to. Well,
I did learn that from my dad as an attorney. A lot of times he would use the Socratic method on me growing up. He'd be like, what do you think about the death penalty? And I'd be like, I think in some cases it's a good thing. And he'd be like, really? Well, what do you think? What if this happens? What
if one person is wrongly convicted and you can't go back?
And then I'll be like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. And then I would realize like, well, he didn't even need to tell me his opinion. Yeah. He changed my opinion.
He Morpheused you. He's like,
yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of times it's just not even good strategy to be angry. As much as
I don't engage, but there is still a part of me that enjoys, like, if I see somebody make a post that I know is going to be inflammatory, I'll just click the comments and be like, oh yeah. Oh boy. You know, and I just, okay. And then I put it away. I don't engage because I've already learned that doesn't scratch an itch for me. But I do enjoy seeing it. I enjoy when my team, I don't like to talk shit when my teams win, but when they do, I do like to go to their other team's websites and just read the sad comments.
Oh my God. That's that schadenfreude.
Yeah, right? I'm like, oh, for example, my Nets beat your Lakers last night. And they shouldn't have because my Nets are terrible. Right. But you had no LeBron as everybody was out. But still, there was a part of me that was like, you know, so I find some joy in it, but I also have learned that it doesn't do anything for me to get involved. So I keep an arm's length.
Whether it's politicians or it's news channels or it's internet clickbait, they're counting on our outrage. Yeah. That's essentially
engagement is engagement.
Yeah. But if you can get someone's emotions riled up, they're going to stay engaged longer. Yeah. And so that used to anger me. I'd turn on the TV and I see, this is all just outrage porn. It's just like, how can we make you angry today because you're going to watch longer? And then I realized, okay, it's just capitalism doing its thing. They're just selling soap and it's advertisement. That's the way you have to connect with somebody's emotions, and the stronger the emotion, the better. And so that's why I realized like, it doesn't serve any purpose for me to watch all day on cable
Definitely
news
not,
or to be scrolling through these things. It's like, if something piques my interest, I'll look it up and I'll read an article about it. And you need to be informed, but you don't need to be plugged into anger and outrage 24/7. So there is a balance to be struck.
And it's never more apparent when you see the curtain fully pulled back to reveal the wizard, when there are posts that websites will put out literally just for engagement. It'll be a picture of Samuel L. Jackson. It'll be like, Morgan Freeman is great. And the comments are just, that's Samuel L. Jackson. And be like, no, I'm pretty sure it's Morgan Freeman. They're literally just posting wrong information just to stimulate comments. Yeah. And you realize, well, if that's the basic need, there literally is no point other than engagement. So don't bother. So.
Well, that actually is the thing, because we've talked about this, how I think you were talking about the Super Bowl and how you could become cynical, realizing like, oh, this is just our corporate overlords sort of manipulating us into, it's like, Valentine's Day is the Hallmark holiday.
The Hallmark holiday.
We all believe now that we have to go buy flowers and cards and all these things because we've been conditioned to believe that, which is great. I mean, what's the downside? They get rich. We have a good time with our loved ones.
Right.
Nobody really loses, but
although I got to give props to my wife. She has fully rejected Valentine's Day. For years we haven't bought in Valentine's Day. Hallmark. So,
but that's one of the things that does get my blood boiling, is when I get that feeling that I'm being manipulated. And I do get on my high horse sometimes, wanting to, it's like, how do you not see it? How do all you people not see it? How you're being manipulated? Like, these people are just reaching into your brain. It's mind control. And they're using your emotions to control you, to get you to spend your money or to vote in a way that is actually against your best interest, because they're willing to manipulate you in that way. And that makes me angry. And I think that's, to a certain extent, righteous anger. I mean, it is a problem. However, at the same time, me getting on my soapbox and yelling at people about it doesn't solve it again. So it's like, how do you strike that balance of recognizing something is unhealthy or it's a problem, but not taking it to the point where you then shoot yourself in the foot in how you react? It's
a tough balance, because you can acknowledge the injustice, but you also have to know your limits. And does this actually affect me? Perfect example. My wife, nothing makes her more angry than someone who parks in front of our gate in our house. And technically it is an illegal parking spot. We live right near a corner and there's a red curb, and it drove her mother nuts too. Back in Staten Island, her mother would call the city every time. And I was always like, what is it? It's not blocking our driveway. Why is it affecting? And she's like, 'cause it's wrong.
Right.
And she makes it a crusade. And I've really worked on, in my own life, trying to be like, while I can acknowledge that this upsets me, is there anything I can do about it? And is it doing anything other than ruining my day to be upset? And if it is, I let it go. And it's improved my life dramatically, not getting upset about the things that I can't control, and having the knowledge, to know the difference between those two things. If I can paraphrase the 12 steps,
the Serenity prayer, which is my mantra. And it became, my mantra in early recovery, because, when I didn't have alcohol to soothe my nerves anymore, when I was just relying on my own devices of self-soothing, I would get really agitated. I would get not just anxious, but also frustrated. Frustrated with myself, frustrated with other people, mostly myself. I'm harder on myself than I'm on other people. And the Serenity prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. If I recite that to myself enough times in a row, I start to realize very clearly what it is that I have to accept, that I can't control, refocus on the things that I can actually have some power over, have some clarity on that. And then after about a half hour of focusing on that, I'm calmer and I'm more effectual, because I know exactly what I need to do and what I shouldn't waste my time trying to do that I can't do. That's been really empowering for me, because even though I know you perceive me as somebody who's very level-headed and very cool, I don't get really worked up, and I don't. And in general, not with other people in particular, it takes a lot to get me riled up or angry or anything like that. Like, in general, I'm not a very reactive person, but I do take things out on myself. And oftentimes it's when I go down a rabbit hole of like obsessive compulsive thinking or behaviors. And all of a sudden I'll find myself, I'm like, why have I been doing this for the last 2 hours? Like, what am I achieving? I'm tense and like my chest is tight and I feel my blood pressure has risen. And in the past, I would have reached for a drink, or I would have, I don't know, done before I drank. I don't know what I would have done. Played the drums, but pounded on the drums really hard or something. I mean, the drums was that for me. It was a release. It was an escape in those ways. But now it's like, I can just slow down. Mm-hmm. I can just step away and realize like, I'm not controlling this anymore by doing this. I'm actually making it worse for myself.
Yeah. and that approach is so indicative of what I was saying at the beginning of this conversation, where we have not cherry picked, but we have all these tools at our disposal to deal with anxiety, to deal with mental health issues when they come up, addiction, that you're taking the Serenity prayer, which is from the 12 steps, but you're also reciting it multiple times, which is a little bit of a mantra from Transcendental Meditation. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You're also forcing yourself to take a step back and breathe, which is some somatic responses. I mean, it's really, it's sort of like a person who says, I'm not religious, but I take a little bit from each, Eastern philosophy and modern Western. It isn't one size fits all. It's you take a little bit, you take what works from each one. And having never been an addict, I still use the concept of that Serenity prayer in my own life to say, what is getting upset going to achieve? Not much. I can't control this thing, so I have to let it go. Mm-hmm. And I love that I'm learning more tools throughout the course of this podcast, throughout my life, of just becoming a little bit more serene in general, and maybe it's old age, maybe it's, I'm getting closer to 50 and it's just, I don't give a shit anymore. And I'm reading, all I need is the fuck you money to go with the fuck you attitude. So I'm working on that. But it's just a much happier way to live. There's so much angst in our lives in our 20s where everything is.
There is some science to that. I mean, there's a reason why there's the stereotype of the angry young man. Mm-hmm. That is something that is.
Is it low testosterone? Am I losing my testosterone?
That's part of it. It's probably part of it.
All right.
Well, I mean, look, I think everyone slows down a little bit. You see it even clinically, some of the diagnoses that can be really problematic in terms of personality disorders and highly emotionally reactive people or anger management, those types of things. A lot of times as people age, it does soften a bit. Mm-hmm. It doesn't go away completely unless you've had a lot of therapy but you take somebody who's a teenager or early 20s and has all of those hormones running and all of that energy and just phase of life, you are conditioned to be rebellious at that point. And then you add on top of that a personality disorder and somebody who has a difficult time regulating their emotions or tolerating distress. And it's just a powder keg. You're going to have some pretty extreme behavior as an outgrowth of that. You take that same person and you add 30, 40 years of life and you slow down the amount of energy they have, whatever. It's not going to be to the same level of impulse, impulsivity and reactivity and however, I have met people in their 50s and 60s who have anger management issues.
I was going to say, there's the flip side of that coin that one of our guests, David Robson, talked about in terms of the echo chamber that you live in, reinforcing your beliefs, which can sort of amplify them to the point of maybe mania, where we've seen our parents' generation completely lose touch with fact and with science, and they've accepted, propaganda as absolute fact, and there's nothing you can do. And you go, 20 years ago, you wouldn't have fallen for this gambit. What happened? And so there is, the benefit of not giving a shit, but there's also the danger of, that sounds like hokey, so I'm not going to listen to it, And so trying to always strive for finding those facts, finding the truth, but also not caring so much when they don't align with your own beliefs. And that's the goal. It's like I said, that serenity of, I live right here in the middle of where the things that I care about are really important, and I do the things that I do to manipulate that world to my will, to be the way I want it, and everything else just goes out the window. So I think we're done here. I think we finished the podcast. No.
We've talked about some heavy stuff already.
Yeah.
I didn't know if that's where we were going to go. I figured we might just have some fun today.
We've talked about the differences and the things that you and I are similar on. Mm-hmm. you and I had a conversation the other night about 2 shows that we're watching. Right? I brought up Severance earlier on the podcast, and you came back with me with like, what about White Lotus? Are you watching White Lotus? And I found White Lotus to be kind of tedious and boring at the end, and you're having a little bit of a with Severance. And I think it's so interesting that our personalities, which if I'm more emotional and you're analytical, I would think, well, Severance is clean and scientific, and you'd love that. And White Lotus is beautiful and emotional, and I'd love that. And yet the opposite is true.
Well, do you want to get into this? Do you want to analyze it?
Let's do it.
Here's my feeling. Okay, let's start with Severance because I want to be clear. I do like Severance. I think it's a good show. It's not exactly like my cup of tea. So that's just from starters part of it. It's not that I think that it's a bad show or that I'm criticizing it.
Sorry to interrupt. Have you been a mystery box fan? Like, did you like Lost? Did you like Fringe? Did you like shows where you had to figure out the answer to the puzzle?
I did like Lost at first, and then I felt duped by Lost, and I hated it for that reason. I felt like this was such a waste of time because I was like, it's going to give me answers, and then it just kept giving me more questions.
True.
And I was like, what was the point of this? I felt it was the manipulation thing. It stirred that up in me. I was like, they just did this to keep us having to tune in. It's like, well, now I have to keep watching because now there's more questions that haven't been answered. And I was like, they're just stringing me along. Like I was like, what's in the pot? What do they called it?
In the hatch?
In the hatch. What's in the hatch? And I was like, finally went in there. I was like, oh my God, what's this whole...
Desmond was in the hatch.
Yeah. But I don't even remember everything that happened to the show. I just remember they started flashing back and forth in time, and it was just like...
The constant.
Yeah.
I just did a rewatch with my son, so I'm still up on Lost. Yeah.
So I mean, I think it was clever, and it was you know, I in watching it, I was like, do they even know where this is going, or they're just like, oh, people are going to be hooked and they're going to have to keep watching. But I did like it at first. In general, no, that is not my cup of tea. In general, the things that I really enjoy are character studies. I like a really great character development, character arc. I like to see somebody and all of their sensitivities and their failings, you know, the ways in which this might be a good person, but they're shitty in this way.
Yeah.
And they learn something or they don't, and then it's tragic. Or like just, I like Shakespeare. I like, you know, the tragic hero or just like small movies about a slice of life where you get to know a person or a group of people, an ensemble, and you see some arc of how that changes in the course of the plot. Severance, my criticisms in that regard were that it was a very slow, long walk in the first season. You were right. The last episode or two of the first season were great.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I stayed tuned to get to that because it was a payoff and it was really, really well done. However, I don't think I would have gotten there had you not said that.
Okay.
Because it was like these people in this white box and you don't know anything about them, and they're separated from their true selves. I understand all the things that are probably at play, or that I hope are at play and will come into play later. However, there was just like a fundamental disconnect for me in that I was like, if you just follow this thread, pull this thread just a little bit, if you just go like one step in, why would anyone sign up for this?
Right.
Like, I understand just the first notion that you could sever yourself from something in your life that's tedious, and you just, I just don't even have to think about work. But then you think, well, that person is trapped in, they're always at work, that part of you. And for some part of you, you're always just having to be at work all the time. And then the rest of you has no daytime. That sounds depressing too, because you have no balance. And so I don't know if most people would come to that conclusion, but for me, I was like, I don't buy this, that anyone would sign up for this, because you're not forgetting the thing that you know what I mean?
It's a bit of a short-sighted approach. You know, if we talk about the specific characters, you know, Mark S is trying to escape that pain of his wife, and yet, like you say, Audi Mark still has that pain.
Yeah,
and now instead of having 6-8 hours a day where he gets to escape it, it's him.
He's just
12 hours a day,
all day now. You know,
so I get that. You know,
but I do hope this is where it's kind of going. One of the things that's at play, and this is from the lens of a therapist, and you know, we've talked about parts work and internal family systems.
Literal internal family systems.
Yeah. Well, I like that it's a play on the idea that we compartmentalize parts of ourselves, and that we do it not necessarily consciously. That's the part where it's hard for me, because they're consciously doing this. unconsciously we do that all the time, right? We compartmentalize things. We have parts that deal with certain parts of our life and don't deal with other things. It's adaptive. It's something we do to deal and cope with traumas and difficulties and anxieties, but it also can become maladaptive when we cut ourselves off or start living too much in one part of us and not in our authentic self. So from that perspective, as a premise, I like what it's playing on. It's just a little obtuse, and there's some of those just suspension of disbelief things that are hard for me. The second season is getting more into the characters and the development of that, and so I am enjoying it more. I just found that for a while there, it was like I was like kind of my mind was wandering while I was watching it, and a lot of it is you're either in a white box or you're in shrouded in darkness, and it's like, so I was like, I don't get why this is so visually stunning, but I think it's interesting, and I'm hooked now. I have to see where it goes. I'm like, I hope they don't lost me with this one.
I think with a show like this, and there are other shows that spring to mind where initially you go in thinking, oh, isn't this a cool concept of these people who do this? And then after you watch a season or you get into the bigger picture, you realize it's more of an extended, I don't want to say metaphor, but an allegory. Yeah. It's a representation of those concepts of our inner lives, compartmentalizing. So the whys and the hows and is this really scientifically, stuff doesn't really matter. Yeah. It's more about, it's a meditation on a certain emotional experience. The same way that The Leftovers, which another mystery box show, incredible show, that it was, the concept of The Leftovers was that a certain percent of the population just literally disappeared. And whether it was the rapture, whether it was scientific, whatever it wasn't the point of the show. It was about how different people dealt with loss and grief, and some people raged and some people shacked up just immediately to find someone new to share their grief with. Some people acted out and it became the whole image was the point. It wasn't this episode, there was a guy with a gun. That stuff didn't matter. And so there was a lot of Severance that the whys and the hows, and is this believable? And would people really do that? Aren't really going to matter, in my mind, when the entire picture is painted. When you step back and say, this was a meditation on grief, on how Mark and how Irving and how all these people are dealing with their own, Helena dealing with the guilt of being, spoiler alert, there I stopped it, of being an Egan and things like that. It's going to be a bigger picture at the end, where it's rather than the specifics of how and why people did the things they did. Even Lost, which I agree that there was a certain bit of meandering, but overall, the feeling that it evoked, the message that it conveyed, that the relationships were what mattered, not the backstories, not Hugo winning the lottery and then having the numbers. It was about these people, coming together and helping each other and love and all those things that are just concepts, as opposed to how are they going to rob the bank? How's the heist going to get done? That's why I love shows like this after the fact.
I hope that's how it ends for me, and that I go back and watch it again and it has more meaning to me, because that's all very theoretical.
True.
And you don't know.
It's a leap of faith.
It's a leap of faith, and you don't know enough about these characters, especially the innies, because you're like, it's supposed to just accept that these parts of them were essentially just born when they came into this box.
Right.
And I'm like, well, that's not very interesting to me. They're newborn babies without, and I'm like, am I supposed to believe that they have none of the background experience that informs the way that they behave of their outies? And it's just like, there's too many questions for me to have a feeling. Yeah.
Don't worry about all that shit. Don't worry about it. Just enjoy it.
So, but I like, it's weird. It's funny you say that, because I to a certain extent, I even though I'm in a feeling profession, I do have a hard time connecting to my emotions. And part of the reason why I'm probably pretty mild-mannered is because I don't get that riled up. I don't feel things that strongly. And in some ways I lament that. I wish that I did. And oftentimes movies in particular, but art in general is my access to my emotions. And so I do respond sometimes to sappy things. I like a good romantic comedy.
Yeah.
I like something that's just bittersweet. I think bittersweet is my favorite emotion in movies. I love a movie in which, or a show in which, something bad is happening, but there's a glimmer of hope. Or it's really sweet, but there's a tinge of sadness to it.
Yeah.
Those types of things seem to affect me most because it seems to be I guess I'm a realist. I like things that feel like real life.
Okay.
And I like to feel that the characters are a study on humanity and not like a theoretical, conceptual thing.
Yeah.
And so if the show at the end of the day is tapping into that really does drive home as the painting emerges and you're not just seeing the sketches and you're seeing the whole thing. And then I have more appreciation for it. And I go back and I even understand it even better. And the characters have more meaning to me. That would be a masterpiece. I hope that's what I feel at the end. I just didn't at first. So we'll see. But
and it's a slow, I mean, you have to give credit to a showrunner and creator and Ben Stiller. And if they did have the foresight to say, and the, what's the word I'm looking for? Have the patience to drip out little, you know, Irving and Burton and Irving, you know, just having
you almost said Bert and Ernie.
Bert and Ernie, yeah, Burving, having the little, you know, their pinkies touch, and it's just it's the littlest bit of connection or the littlest bit of humanity leaking in that you go, oh, maybe they know what they're doing. And so on a long enough timeline, you can see that. And so, you have to have faith that a showrunner or a creator or a writer are smart enough to have the, you know.
I guess that's what it is, because it's funny you should mention that. A lot of times the things that I dislike about a lot of things, especially theatrical movies these days, is they just hit you over the head with the message and the action and everything. Like we're idiots.
Right.
And a lot of my favorite, we've connected about, you know, the 90s and the independent film and what an incredible era for film that was, because so many of my favorite movies from that era, they don't
spoon feed you.
They don't spoon feed you. They don't walk you to the meaning that you're supposed to derive from it. It's just some subtle little thing that you're waiting for, and then it finally happens, and it like there's so much more emotional resonance because you come to it.
You feel like you're like, I figured that out. They didn't. Yeah.
And I love, like, for instance, we both love the movie Big Night. There's so much going on in the subtext of that movie, and it's funny and it's enjoyable.
And America loves Stanley Tucci in a supporting role.
Absolutely. And it's a quaint little slice of life and all those things. And there is a moral to it, but it's the last scene, you know, when it's one long shot and he finally puts his arm around him. It's clear they've made up. They didn't even have to say a word.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's to me, such good writing and such good execution. And I love things that slow walk in that way. However, that's a movie. That's a 2-hour movie, right? When you have to wait 6 years and a year or two between seasons, and you're like, oh, just get to it already. Like, that's harder for me.
Yeah.
But I do love subtlety in film. And I do think that's something, because of the advent of the Marvel universe and all of the big...
Not a lot of subtlety there.
Not a lot of subtlety. And I feel like those are basically essentially cartoons and storylines, you know, comic books made for children that we're led to believe are adult pieces of art now. And it's like, no, I'm left cold by that because I need to bring myself into the space.
Okay, so pitch me on White Lotus. Okay. Tell me what I missed and explain why that scratches that itch for you.
Well, tell me how much you watched of the first season?
Yeah, I watched a few episodes, and I was, you know, it was who's in the box, who's dying, the flashbacks and the flash forwards, and it seemed a little too campy for me. It was a little too not soap opera-y, but like farce. You know, we've talked about I don't always enjoy the silly farce and maybe had I given it more time, it wasn't that it wasn't good. I thought it was well acted and well written. It just didn't, for whatever reason, it didn't connect with me. It didn't. I wasn't compelled to find out what happened next. I was like, I'm over it.
Okay.
You know,
I don't remember if it took me a few episodes to get into it. In my memory, I feel like I liked it right away, but that often is the case with new shows where I'm like, there's enough here.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a slam dunk, but there's enough here for me to keep
I really
watching.
feel like you have to earn, in a pilot, you have to earn, all right, I'm going to check out episode 2, because I watched a ton of pilots where I go, nope, I don't need to find out.
Well, in particular, in this format now where it's like only going to be 8 episodes, it's like, well, you can't waste an episode, right?
Right, exactly.
It's one thing if you're going back and watching
22 episodes of ER.
yeah, and you're like, you know what? It probably the first season it needs a few
exactly. It's find its legs.
To find it. Yeah. In this day and age with the HBO format or the streaming format where you're gonna maybe get 4 seasons and it's gonna be maybe 8 episodes a season, like it better hit you over the head right away. I do feel like it did grab me right away, and I think the reason why is because I got the sense like this is a slice of life. This is just an ensemble piece of these characters that we're going to get to know. There is the mystery element or the murder mystery. There wasn't a whole lot of flashing forward and back.
I think each episode started with, a coffin being offloaded on a plane. It's something like that where I'd be like, oh yeah, I got to figure out who's going to die and the whole.
Well, I feel like that was just like a device to keep you interested and really kind of irrelevant to what it was just kind of it's I guess a simple device to just like
bookending each episode
and build suspense. Like here are the stakes. What I found amazing from season 1, and season 1 may be my favorite still, was just how many layers there were going on in terms of conversations about class, about money, about politics. Which was something I always appreciate is something where you can watch it and depending on what your biases are going in, you're going to take different meaning from it. Because watching it, I was thinking to myself, I was like, this is funny. They're skewering the liberal elite, right? But then I'm like, the liberal elite, like myself watching this are thinking they are skewering the rich right.
Right.
And the ignorant or the uneducated or whatever. And then it's clear there's in all of the seasons there are comments about class and money and about corruption and that sort of thing. However, there's so much nuance to it that you can read different things into it, and it really is an equal opportunity statement on how we're all idiots. Yeah, and a lot of the things we were just talking about earlier about how we'd all be better served to actually listen and not be so dug in on our strong opinions about things, and that there is equal folly in extreme thinking or simplistic thinking. Biases of any kind are limiting. And then also there's just each season is a little different. The first season I see being mostly a play on class and money and then like gender roles. The second season is more about sex and about relationships. They're all about relationships too. It still remains to be seen what the third season is going to really be about, although there's a lot about money and class as well. But also the overriding theme is addiction. Addiction to phones, addiction to technology, addiction to money, addiction to sex. These are all addictions that are playing out in the course of it. And there's something we talked about with David Robson, why smart people do stupid things. Another thing I always love is characters where they're like, this is an otherwise intelligent person. And you're like, oh, why are you doing that? Yeah. And then they keep digging a deeper and deeper trench for themselves. And cringe humor where you're like, oh God, don't do that.
Which I've touched on. I do not enjoy.
That's not your thing. Okay, so that is my thing. See, we're different.
Yeah.
But I find that hilarious and also intriguing because you're like, I'm with you. I'm with this person. I get where they're at. Even if I disagree with them, I understand them on an emotional level, and it's very well written and very well executed. So I've bought in and I'm with this character, and then they go down roads that I'm like, I can't go there with you, but I see why you went there. And I'm like, don't do it. And it's a statement on how otherwise well-intentioned people do terrible things. Otherwise intelligent people do stupid things. And it has a lot to do with how we get entrenched in these addictions and these things that we're manipulated by, or we buy into a certain way of thinking. And then it takes us down this road that now we're too far down this road. We can't go back. Yeah. And so there's a lot of layers and things and nuance that's going on that I think a lot of people watching this show, because it's obviously these are both extremely popular shows.
Absolutely.
People are connecting to it, even if they're intellectualizing it like I am, in terms of how I'm like, oh, that's so clever. See what they're doing there? This character's like this and this was like that. And this dialogue has all these layers going on. Or they're just responding to it on an emotional level. That's good writing to me, and that's good execution, because it's either
on this lofty level or it's on this guttural level. Either way, you're connected to it, but you're not. So,
well, no. Again, but you explain it well in a way that harkens back to other shows about people that I think of Walter White, I think of Tony Soprano, guys who did horrible things, but because we were sucked into I can relate to Tony as a family guy. I might not deal with it the same way, but I see the frustrations, and Walter's trying to do the best for his family, and so there is a long tradition of character, especially in the golden age of television and prestige television, which I would put both these shows in that category, of subverting the old model of the infallible dad who's only, the Alan Thicke type of, he's just the great guy. Good people who do bad things, bad people who do good things. And so we all find some common ground in these shows. So whether it's Severance, whether it's White Lotus, whether it's any of these shows, there's something that we can find reflected back to us from our own experiences. And whether that's an emotional response or an intellectual response, it doesn't matter. As long as there's a response, as long as you get someone to comment on that picture of Samuel L. Jackson, right, you've done your job. So Mike White, Ben Stiller, you guys do your job perfectly.
Well, as much as anything, I think with White Lotus, it just felt very timely when it came out, because it's not an overt statement on Trumpism or liberal, whatever you'd criticize, the DEI politics and things like that. It is making statements on those things. However, again, depending on which side you are of those things, you're going to perceive the statement a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But what you see happen again and again is characters getting into a situation where they're being manipulated in some way. And I don't want to give too much of a spoiler. Right. But go against their own interests because they're either addicted to something. There is an overt addict in the first season. You have characters in the second season manipulated and duped by people by, just a dependence or a addiction to love or sex, or ending up in situations where you have bad intentioned people taking advantage of them. That's the overriding thing that I'm connecting with, because it feels it's not like, here, let me give you a statement on our politics. It's like, here is what's going on in our society.
And what do you see in it? Like you say, what do you see reflected back? And I also think that it's worth mentioning that both of these shows were a result of they were made in a COVID timeline. They were both. Mike White was like, let's take 10 people and we'll go to Hawaii for 3 months and be quarantined. We'll be able to create this show. Severance, same idea. Severance was a concept of, isolation and closed off. And so the same way that American Idiot was born out of the Bush administration and the war in Iraq, great struggle creates great art. And so I think there's probably a lot more to unpack, that these two shows, which may come at things from a different point of view, were born of a very isolating time where people were forced to sort of boil things down to what's essential, what's important, who do I want to surround myself with?
It's an interesting takeaway from this conversation is like, these shows actually probably have more in common than we first thought.
Are they a yin and yang of those struggles?
Yeah, and like, one is more just to your sensibilities than mine and vice versa, but they're both responding to the same things going on in our society and making statements that are subtle enough that one or the other of us didn't get it at first.
And that's okay, because it's not for everybody.
And it's brings this whole conversation full circle in terms of like, you and I don't have to agree about every single thing. And the same way we don't have to agree about everything with our guests or with everyone that we meet in the process of this.
But we learn, I don't know if I'm inspired to give White Lotus a second chance, but I see it from a different perspective, and we don't normally do things like this, but I'll just do this now. Listeners, watchers, put some shows in the comments of things that you feel do this for you. Maybe there's shows that we haven't seen or that we haven't talked about that that really paint that tapestry the way I explained, or that really touch on things with, subtle dialogue and things like that. So put some shows in the comments. Let's get a dialogue going with all of our listeners, and we'll have a big salon talking about the art of television and film.
Well, I like the idea that because we're creative people, we love.
Yeah, I want recommendations. I'd love to.
I mean, at a certain point, we can only have so many conversations with coaches and
it's true
about anxiety and we talk about a lot of other stuff, and I think that's okay for it to be a part of our show to talk.
So tune in next week when Ben Stiller and Mike White will be here on the couch. We'll see.
So I think this ended up being a little.
It was great.
It was a little longer than I thought that it would be, but you and I, once we get going,
I
think all of our intros should be over an hour.
I agree. Let's just get rid of the guests. Let's just have a conversation show each week, you and me.
So anything else we need to cover before we sign off for this
Nothing
week?
Other than to say thank you to our listeners and our watchers, because you're appreciated, you're valued. We love having you as part of our community. We want to interact with you more. So reach out to Harder to Breathe podcast at gmail.com. Leave comments on our YouTube and our rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That really helps. If people start to see those review numbers go up and those 5-star ratings go up, it will start to be recommended as a new and upcoming podcast. So if you love the show and you want to be a part of that community and you value us as much as we value you, please spread the word in any way that you can.
All right. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Harder to Breathe podcast. Join us every Tuesday for new episodes. And, I guess we'll do this maybe once a quarter, that type of thing. But next week we'll have a guest as we usually do. And I think next week is going to be a big one if it comes out in the order that we're thinking it's going to come out. I won't spoil it. All right. Thank you again. We'll see you next time right here on the Harder to Breathe podcast.